Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Christina, and if you're back, welcome back. Today is going to be a little bit of a different video because I'm sharing a little bit more on my personal life, and I'm a little bit nervous to record this just because while I've talked about this with many people and I'm not at all ashamed or embarrassed in any kind of way, it's still really scary to put it out there for, potentially hundreds or thousands of people to judge you. A lot of you are just here for beauty content, and I totally get that, so you don't feel like you have to watch this whatsoever. But I feel like I would be doing my channel a disservice and taking a very big part of my personality out if I didn't include content like this in here. Long story short, I'm here today to share with you my infertility journey, how I got to make my dreams come true and have my son, how my husband and I got to do it. I didn't do it alone. And where we're going from here, and talk to you a little bit more about embryo adoption because some of you have asked me questions about it on Instagram. So I thought that maybe this could be helpful for someone that is either struggling with making a decision on growing their family, or is going through infertility right now, or maybe you just found out that you can't have children, or maybe you've known for a long time and you just feel very alone. I just thought that I would make this, and if I only connect with one person and make you feel like you are not alone, then that's awesome. Then I already did, what I wanted to do, I guess. But let's start at the beginning. So I have always wanted to be a mother since I was a child, and that was just, I knew that I had bigger dreams. I was like, I'm gonna be an actress and a lawyer and a writer. I had big dreams, okay? But I wanted to be a mom. I knew that that was not even like a question. I'm very, nurturing and motherly, and I just knew that that was gonna be part of my story regardless. As I got older, I started to have this like feeling in my gut that I wasn't gonna be able to have children. And I don't want to take you into like the depths of that because it has to do a lot with the rest of, my life in general. But I just always felt like if something could go wrong, it was going to go wrong, because that's kind of how my life has gone in many ways. But I just had this feeling like, of course, I'm not going to be able to have kids. Like, this is what I want most in my whole life, of course. So around 14 or 15, I started experiencing probably the worst pain that I've ever experienced. I've experienced now, childbirth, and it does not compare to the pain that I was experiencing. Doubled over in pain, throwing up on the toilet from the pain. And sorry if you guys aren't, interested in a super graphic thing, but this is important, and, you'll find out why. Passing out from the amount of pain, not being able to sleep, just the cramping and the bleeding was just out of control. And my grandmother and my mom, they were like, this doesn't, yeah, cramps hurt, but this seems a little bit outside of what the normal range of pain should be. So probably around 15 or 16, I started consulting with doctors. So I went to my general practitioner, and from the very beginning, I wish that we had advocated for me a little bit more, because he was like, well, you just have a low tolerance for pain. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's, wow, I must really be a wimp, And I always thought that I had a pretty high tolerance for pain, so that was kind of weird. But hey, if your doctor tells you that every woman on this planet experiences this and you're just the one wimp, then okay. So I went along with it. Years go by, it doesn't get better, and in the process, my doctor tells me, well, maybe it's IBS, so I get medication for that. Maybe it's anxiety, I get medication for that. I start seeing a counselor for anxiety. Like all these steps, right? Never at any point does anyone say the word endometriosis. And I'm explaining to them like the amount of pain that I'm in, and my doctor never orders, a sonogram or an ultrasound or just anything. And I'm ashamed to say this, but I, stuck to birth control and painkillers my whole life until my husband and I got married. We got married in August, and we had a deal where by March, we were going to give ourselves till March, and in March, we could start trying to have babies. Because I was like, okay, it's our wedding night. Can we start trying right now? And he was like, slow down. Let's wait a few months. So we agreed March. So March comes around, and I'm like, yes, it's baby time. 6 months go by and no pregnancy or anything like that. So I start kind of, that nagging feeling inside me starts to really get to me. And a healthy couple can take up to a year to conceive. So you're not infertile because 6 months later you aren't having a baby, you're not pregnant. But I just had a feeling that something was not right all my life. And then the pain was getting worse, and I still didn't really have any kind of relief from that. And I started to gain weight. So I was like, okay, something is seriously wrong. I switched doctors again, and after doing my own research, I diagnosed myself with endometriosis. It just fit me to a T, and I just knew that that's what it was. Not really knowing all that much about endometriosis, not knowing that there is no cure, thinking that as long as I know what it is, we can handle it. I'm always the fixer, like we're gonna fix this. So I switched doctors again, and I immediately say to her, I've been trying to have a baby for a year, which I hadn't, and endometriosis runs in my family, which it doesn't, and I think this is what's going on, and I would like for someone to test me. I had to lie to finally get to someone to think outside of the normal box and listen to me. Immediately, she referred me to a specialist, and immediately they did an ultrasound. And usually endometriosis is not diagnosed until you actually have a laparoscopy, or basically they put a tube inside through your belly button, and they look around and see, if you have adhesions, lesions, growths, cysts, anything like that. Endometriosis is when your endometrial tissue, the lining of your uterus, starts growing in places where it shouldn't. It also causes scarring and things like that. So it makes it very difficult for an egg to implant. When you get an ultrasound, they put the little thing over your tummy, and they, you can see what's going on. The second it touched my stomach, she was like, oh. And I'm like, what is it? And she's like, well, I see here that you have like 6 endometriomas. They were like these big balls, like this big, all over. And when I looked at it, I'm like, oh, it just looked like I had tons of little ovaries basically inside my uterus. I was like, what does that mean? And she's like, well, I'll have to just get the doctor to come in here and explain it to you. But, yes, you have endometriosis, but we'll wait for the doctor. And I immediately started crying, and I'm like, because it looked so bad. And the doctor comes in, and she's like, yes, you have endometriosis, stage 4. It's really bad, and we would recommend for you to have surgery, pretty soon. We're going to go ahead and refer you to a fertility specialist that, does that, and then you can work with them on a fertility plan. And I'm crying, and I'm like, well, what are my chances of getting pregnant? And she was like, on your own, less than 1%. That was just like debilitating for me. And I know that seems super, super dramatic, but at this point, I'm 26 years old, and I've been told that you know, I've done everything right my whole life, but sorry, you know, your biggest dream is over. You have 1% chance of ever accomplishing that. That was really hard and really isolating. And at this point, you know, none of my friends are necessarily having children. Well, to be clear, half my friends are already having babies, like already giving birth and having their first kid, and, you know, not even a blip on their radar that there's any problems with anyone having this. I mean, we're 26 years old. And my other half are still partying and like, they can't even believe that I want to have a baby at this age, right? So I'm feeling incredibly alone, and you just feel, frankly, like a piece of shit. Like less of a woman, because you're like, the one job that I'm supposed to be able to get done, that nature tells you that's your only purpose in this planet, is to have children, and you cannot do it. Like, what a freaking failure. Had I not had the support of, you know, my family and my friends, my best friends, and my husband, I don't know what I would have done, but I was in a very deep state of depression for a little while, for probably a few months. But I immediately, you know, like I said, I'm a fixer, so I'm like, okay, I know what's wrong, I know what's going on, and these are the steps that need to be taken, and that's what we're gonna do. Once I have a plan and I have a purpose, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be able to get through this. Like, we're gonna do this. It's gonna be wonderful. We're gonna have millions of babies. It's gonna be great. And I go see my first doctor, my first specialist, and right away, he sees the pictures of the ultrasound sonogram and tells me, yes, we have to get in there and have surgery, because there's just no way that we can even move forward without that. And the second thing he tells me is, for this case of endometriosis being so bad, he does recommend doing IVF. And if you're familiar with IVF, it's basically where they take your eggs, your husband's sperm, put them together, you get a little embryo, and they implant that embryo, and you hope it grows. So you're basically doing everything to make a baby, but outside of your body. It takes all the guesswork and chance out of having a child, and then they implant it in a very specific place, and you just pray and hope that it works. And IVF is probably, in most areas, ranges between $13,000 and $18,000, depending on the type of medication you use, depending on, you know, where you're going, but usually that's what you're looking at. To me, at 26 years old, freshly, you know, newly married, I'm also in school at this time, getting my interior design degree, that you might as well have told me that IVF cost $7 million, because I was like, well, all right, can't do that, not gonna happen. It's, you know, absolutely ridiculous. And my husband's like, we'll find a way, we're gonna do this. Like, he's just the most calm and supportive man in the world, and he was positive that it would be okay. But I was like, no, it's not gonna be okay. And our doctor basically tells us that if we're not ready for that, we can do a few things. So we can have the surgery, and the first 6 months after surgery are your best chances to conceive on your own. So he tells me I wouldn't wait the full 6 months, but I would give you maybe 3 months and then come back and we'll do an IUI, which is basically what people kind of jokingly refer to it as the turkey baster method. So that's what we do. We go into surgery. My surgery takes 6 hours because it's so incredibly complicated. We try for 3 more months, does not work, and we go into doing IUIs. And IUIs are about, I think at the time they were $2,500, and we do it 2 times. So that's $5,000 right there. Not that this is all about the money, but I just want to explain to you like the roller coaster and they call it the infertility treadmill because you just want to get to the finish line, right? But you're basically on a treadmill. You're never going to be going anywhere. You're just on that same track, like a little hamster wheel. And you have to kind of know when you need to stop, right? And at that point, everyone's telling you that it's going to happen, that you're young, that it's, not that big of a deal, that with enough money, with enough treatment, with enough time, like you're going to be able to do this. And it just becomes your whole focus, and it becomes entirely who you are. And you cannot remove yourself from that. Like and you can't understand how other people are like living their normal lives, and you're over here like experiencing the worst thing in the world in your world. And listen, to many of you that haven't gone through infertility, you're like, there's people starving, there's people that have lost their parents, there's people that have lost their kids, there's way worse things in the world. 100% agree. But you cannot tell someone in pain that their pain is not valuable because someone else is experiencing that pain worse than you. Like, it's all relative, right? It's all relative. And at that point, this is all I could see. And it started affecting our marriage. It started affecting my friendships. I didn't want to go anywhere. It was just a very lonely and isolating time. And it was just really, really hard. And it was really hard to get out of it. I started seeing a therapist, to just make peace with it, because I started to think, well, maybe this is just not going to happen for me, and I need to go back to live my life. I need to go back to being who I am and being a 26-year-old and just not living in this misery, A year has gone by since we first started trying. There's been surgeries, there's been all kinds of stuff going on. We've had 2 IUIs, and the next step is IVF. We end up taking a medical loan to be able to pay for that IVF. I don't want to cry about this one. I still cry about it just because it's so painful to think about that time and where I was at that place, and just the hope that I had, right? I was like, this is gonna work. Like, we got the money. It's gonna work. This is the best doctor, and all these, and I'm young, and all these things. And we retrieved so many eggs, and they looked great, and all this stuff, and the IVF failed. That phone call, that when they call you and tell you that no, you're not pregnant, it didn't work out, it's one of the worst feelings I've experienced. I mean, when the day they told me I couldn't have kids, I collapsed in the hallway crying hysterically. But this was a whole other level of sorrow, because this was like, I felt at that time, this was our one chance. This was our one chance, and it was gone. I took it pretty hard. That loss for me was very hard. We had put in 2 little embryos, and, I just really thought, like, at least one will grow into my baby. And that didn't happen, so devastating. And I was angry. I was angry at everything. I was angry at my life. I was angry at my luck. I felt like my husband married a lemon. I felt like I was damaged goods. I'm not a super religious person, but I'm pretty spiritual, and I hate when people are like, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. But I've always had a very good relationship with God, the way I see God and the way I talk to God. And I was like, okay, I can deal with the 7,000 other horrible things that you've thrown my way until now, but like, this is it. Like, do you hate me? At that time, though, I finally decided that it was time for me to stop living in that and just be like, done. Just be done. Move on to a different plan and just be done. No more infertility treatments. We'll look into adoption. We'll look into, foster to adopt. And that's another thing I wanted to talk about, okay? A lot of you may not be experiencing infertility, and I mean, if you're not, you probably aren't watching this, but most of you know someone. I mean, 1 in 7 couples struggle with some kind of infertility. So every single one of you either has someone in their lives or knows of someone that has experienced this, and I promise you that every single one of you that hasn't gone through infertility has said something like, you can just adopt, or why don't you just adopt? Well, why don't you adopt? That's the thing, right? Yes, of course that's an option, and it's a beautiful option, and every one of us, if possible and can do it, should do it. It is the right thing to do. There are so many kids out there that need homes. I hope that we can foster to adopt at some point pretty soon. But it is not for everybody. First of all, adoption is expensive. It can cost almost $60,000 depending on what type of adoption you're looking for. There's also, if you adopt through foster care, there's all kinds of other things. While that is less expensive, there's almost no cost to you. There's also a million trial dates. You still have to try to reunite that child with their parent for at least a year. A lot of the times the adoptions fall through and they go to a grandparent or a parent. There's also health issues that you might have to deal with, or behavioral issues that you have to deal with. It is not for everyone. While it is so nice and rosy to think that if you can't have a baby, you can just adopt one, it's not that simple for everybody. It's not cheap for everybody, and not everyone should adopt a child from foster care or is equipped to handle the issues that come with a lot of those things. I mean, it's a personal decision, and you cannot tell someone, adopt. Just get over it and adopt when you haven't done it yourself. If you haven't adopted a child yourself, ask yourself, well, why haven't I done it? Just because I can have a baby? No. It's not an infertile person's job to adopt all the children in the world. If it's your calling, then that's when you should adopt. Also, adoption does not cure infertility. It cures childlessness. So the pain that you have felt, the loss that you have felt, the grieving that you still need to do, all those things need to happen before you can even get to the point where you're like, you know what? I don't care that it's my own flesh and blood. I just want to be a parent. Then you can move on. I got to that point pretty quickly because I have never necessarily wanted a child of my own. I'm like, my genes aren't even that good. I'm broken as hell. Like, I'm fine, raising a child that's not my own flesh and blood because I will still love them and I just want to be a mother. So I got there pretty quickly, but I still had to grieve, all the dreams that I had about being pregnant and all these other things. I still had to deal with all that. For an entire year, I was pretty much done with infertility, and we started to look into adoption and researching it and just getting incredibly overwhelmed with the cost and the time and the process. And, we were like, okay, well, I guess we just have to save. At that time, the agency that we had kind of picked was $33,000. So we're like, okay, we're just going to start saving $33,000 and we will adopt, and that's what we're going to do, and that's our plan, and we can go forward. So I started school again. I started focusing on myself again. I started seeing my friends again and, living a life. Something changed in me that year where towards the end of the year, I started to reconnect with God a little bit more. And again, this is not a religious thing, but just starting to feel like, no, he doesn't hate me. It's just, there's a different path for me. Maybe it's talking about my journey. Maybe it's whatever it may be. I just started feeling like everything was going to be okay, that it was going to present itself for me and us, and that, we would get through this. We would get out of this, and that regardless, I would be okay. I started to just really make peace with a lot of that. And I had a dream. Not a MLK type of dream, but I had a dream that my body told me it was time to try again. That it was time to just give infertility treatments one more shot before I moved on to adoption, to switch to another doctor. And the next day I said to my husband, I said, Ryan, I think I kind of want to do this one more time. And he said, I have been feeling the exact same way, and I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to upset you. So we decided, okay, that's it, we're doing that. So I switched doctors. The best, most sensitive, wonderful guy in the world. My doctor previously was this like big hotshot deal and was incredibly full of himself. And this doctor was like humble and helpful and sweet and kind and just really understood everything that I had gone through. World's different. So already I just felt like the universe or God or somebody like sent this man to me. Like I was just so thankful. And the nursing staff was just incredibly wonderful. And our first IVF cycle with this new doctor, I got pregnant. I still cry about it because it was such... It's like running a marathon in the desert and getting that glass of water, where I was like, oh my God, like it's over. I can breathe. It's over. Like, I did it, you know? So I get pregnant, and it's just, they put 3 embryos in, and one little guy sticks around. We hear his little heartbeat, just, I mean, unreal, the amount of joy. I've just crying and jumping and screaming, and I'm calling everyone, and I'm just like, just, you know, the best feeling in the entire world that you can possibly imagine. That's how I felt. Like I just won everything. Finally, you know, after 3 years, actually, it had been 3 years since we were like, let's try having a baby. And you just feel so incredibly lucky, and you just want to like put yourself in a little bubble and like never leave it, because you don't want anybody to disrupt this perfect thing that's happening. And so happy, and just could tell everyone. Like I would go to the grocery store and I would be like, I'm pregnant. You can't tell, but I'm pregnant. Like I was so obnoxious. I was probably the most like obnoxious, happiest person in the world. Like we were so excited, and you know, started planning everything. Now a couple weeks go in and I start bleeding pretty badly, and that was really, really scary. And our doctor was like, come in right now. I think it was a Sunday, and he met us there on a Sunday. And we did an ultrasound, and everything was okay. We had a couple more scares like that as we went. And, you know, his delivery was not what we were expecting, but he came here. He got here. When I talk about my son, I get incredibly emotional because he's perfection. Like, he is literal perfection. God does not hate me. He loves me so much that he sent me an angel from heaven. Yeah. Man, my kid is so freaking cool. Like, he's such a cool kid. He is so much fun. He is such a sweetheart. And it has been like the highest pleasure in my life has been being his mother. If you are in the middle of this infertility treadmill, I'm I'll tell you a few things. One, listen to your gut. Just really listen. Listen to the signs, listen to the universe, listen to yourself. You know, obviously be wary and, you know, be conscious of your budget and your money and all those things. Like, don't take out a $200,000 loan just trying to make this happen. Like, but at the same time, fight, you know, like, fight for this. It is worth it. It is worth every tear. It is worth everything. Like, fight for your family. I promise you it's worth it. Like, I promise you. And maybe that means fighting for your adopted child that's waiting for you in Russia, or, you know, like, just don't stop. I'm sorry I'm crying. I'm such an ugly crier. We'll stop in like 2 seconds, I promise. These are not tears of sadness. These are tears of just joy and relief and just like, oh, you know. Let your path change. Let the path guide you. Let life guide you into your new plan. Try to let go of what you've always imagined and come up with something new to chase. But at the same time, sometimes when things look the darkest and when it seems like the hardest times, that's when you need to push the hardest to get through it. You know, I'm not a motivational speaker, but today I am. That's my advice to you as someone, you know, on the other side. Now, I will tell you that having a child does not fix all those infertility issues, because I still, you know, have a lot of pain that has to do with that, because it's never going to be easy for me. You know, if I want to have a sibling for my son, it's not like I can just be like, oh, let's have another baby. Like, it's tears, it's blood work every other day, it's injections twice a night, it's money, tons and tons of money, and doctors, and it's not easy. It's not easy for me, and it's not easy for a million of you out there that are going through the same thing. While it's been the greatest joy of my life and I'm so incredibly grateful, I don't feel like my family is complete. Will I be okay if I never have another child? 100% yes. My child is amazing. But he begs, literally begs for a sibling. Tells everyone that he wants a sibling. What do you want for your birthday? A sister! Like, that breaks my heart, because I just can't give that to him. Since we've had our son, we have done 2 more Ivf cycles. One got shut down because it went so terribly, and the other one we couldn't even make it to transfer because my eggs were so bad. So a lot has changed. A lot changed in 2 years. When we went back to the doctor after 2 years, my son was 2, and we were like, we're ready, let's do this. A lot changed in my body. And, you know, I look back now and I realize that God, universe, whatever you believe in, told me, like, this is your time. You need to go back. You need to do this. This is like the very magical window is right here. And you might miss it if you don't listen. And it happened. We had our son, and then now my eggs are crap. So we were basically told, you know, why don't you look into an egg donor? I wasn't quite done with the possibility of being pregnant again, and I was like, well, I don't know how I feel about having an egg donor, because then it's like this woman I don't know, but my husband's sperm. I felt a little bit weird. Like, I felt like I'd rather have none of us have any kind of genetic link to this child versus, like, it's this other woman's eggs. I don't know. And that's your personal thing, right? Like, that's your personal struggle. You might feel totally differently. But for me, I was like, you know, I'd rather just adopt. Like, I'd rather just go that direction. And our doctor mentioned something about embryo donation or embryo adoption. And I had kind of vaguely been aware of it, but I wasn't educated on it whatsoever. And so I started doing research, and I just thought how cool. Like, how cool is this? Basically, couples that have had IVF and have embryos left over and they are done growing their family, and instead of destroying these embryos, someone like us can come and adopt them. And so it's a way for me to experience pregnancy one more time, to give my son a sibling and have him go through that with me, with our adopted child. Like, that's really cool, you know? That's really, really cool. Maybe in 10 years, I'll be looking back at this and I will have 5 kids and each child will have come here in a totally different way, which is just cool, you know? That's what embryo adoption is. You're basically adopting someone else's embryos and implanting them in yourself and hoping you get a baby out of it. So we are in that journey right now. We have passed our home study. We have passed all the preliminary tests. In 2 weeks, we go for our first mock transfer, which is basically they just look at how you are looking in there, and they will figure out where they're going to place the embryo when it's time, and we're going to get to meet the team of doctors and everything. The place that we have chosen is actually in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we're in Texas. So it's kind of cool because we get to travel for that. The place that we chose is called NEDC, the National Embryo Donation Center. They're just one of the main places where you can go and do this. One of the benefits to doing this, it costs less than a traditional IVF cycle. It also costs less than doing egg donation. So if you decide that you want to go with an egg donor, you not only have to pay the egg donor, but then you also have to go through an entire IVF cycle just like you normally would. So that's even more expensive than IVF cycle because you have to pay for their part of IVF cycle and you, plus you have to find the woman if you don't know her and probably pay her. And, you know, that's just incredibly costly in general. So this was kind of a really good marriage of everything that we were considering and all the, you know, things that we were struggling with. It just feels right for us. So it may not feel right for you and you might be like, that's really sci-fi, I don't like that. Then, you know, hey, no judgment here. We all have our paths. But for us, we were like, you know, we know how much tears, how much struggle, and how much love goes into the IVF process, and knowing that all these little embryos are sitting there, you know, waiting for someone to take a chance on them. And they've been made with so much love and care that these parents are having a really hard time letting them go, that they, you know, rather give them to a couple like us. That's a beautiful thing. Like, that's, you know, that makes me feel a lot better about where this journey has taken us in general. Another really cool thing is that I've been able to talk to my son about that. My son is now 3 and he, you know, understands as much as a 3-year-old's gonna understand, but he knows, like, we have to go to this doctor, and he knows about embryos and all that stuff, and he's learning way more than probably any 3-year-old knows about biology. And he's excited, and he's, you know, and he knows about adoption. And it was not a short story whatsoever, but that in a nutshell is my infertility story and where we're going next with it. And I hope that you guys, you know, found this interesting, helpful, you found support or information that you might have been looking for. If you've made it this far into this video, I love you. You get a cookie. And you know, hopefully this helped you in some way. Whatever reason brought you to watch this video, I thank you for watching it. Again, thank you so much for choosing to spend time with me. You know, you have a million other places you could be and you'd rather be here, so that's pretty awesome. Give me a thumbs up if you liked this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.